When we talk about bodybuilding legends, a few names immediately pop into fans' minds. But only two men in the history of the sport managed to hit the insane milestone of winning 8 Mr. Olympia titles in a row. The first was Lee Haney, who ruled the stage from 1984 to 1991. The second was Ronnie Coleman, who dominated from 1998 to 2005. That record still stands today as one of the greatest achievements in bodybuilding, reserved only for the giants who pushed the sport to the next level. What's really interesting is that Ronnie Coleman, famously known as the King, never hid who his biggest inspiration was: Lee Haney. And when a champ like Coleman points to someone else as his idol, that says a lot about the greatness of that man. Haney, with his discipline and innovative approach, became a symbol of excellence at a time when bodybuilding was trying to find its identity after Arnold Schwarzenegger's era. Throughout the 80s and early 90s, Haney was simply unbeatable. His physique balanced size, proportion, and symmetry in a way nobody had ever seen before. That perfect combo not only kept him on top of the Olympia stage for almost a full decade, but also turned him into the blueprint for what modern bodybuilding was supposed to look like. That's why many call him Arnold's natural successor, keeping alive the charisma and greatness that the sport demanded. But Haney didn't shine only under the bright lights of competition. His influence stretched far beyond the stage, landing him on the covers of the world's most famous fitness magazines, inspiring millions of young athletes. You also can't talk about Haney without mentioning his personality, both on and off stage. Always professional, always smiling, always charismatic. He represented the sport with dignity and respect. So how about you? Did you already know Lee Haney's story? Had you ever heard that Coleman considered him his idol? This is just the beginning of the journey we're diving into, showing how Haney not only collected trophies, but also shaped the history of bodybuilding itself. Lee Haney's story begins on November 11, 1959, in the small town of Fairburn, Georgia. But it was in Spartanburg, South Carolina, that he grew up and first started shaping his dreams. From a young age, Haney was fascinated by symbols of strength and power. While most kids were into comic book heroes, he found inspiration in larger-than-life figures: Samson from the Old Testament and Hercules from Greek mythology. To him, these weren't just stories, they were real role models. Young Lee didn't just admire those legends, he wanted to become like them. His bedroom turned into a mini temple of motivation, with walls covered in posters of bodybuilding icons. One name in particular stood out: Robbie Robinson, the legendary Black Prince of bodybuilding. Looking at those pictures, Haney didn't just see muscles, he saw a clear path to follow. That's when the dream of becoming a stage giant really took root. That dream only got stronger when, at 12 years old, Haney asked for a special Christmas gift: a pair of dumbbells. His parents delivered, giving him a simple set made of plastic and filled with sand. For most people, it might have looked like just a toy, but for Lee, it was the key to a whole new world. Along with the weights came a Charles Atlas training manual, which quickly became his go-to guide. With an unusual discipline for his age, Haney threw himself into the exercises. He repeated each movement with focus, not having the slightest idea that one day he'd be standing on bodybuilding's biggest stage. While other kids his age were more worried about playing around, Haney was already building a different mindset. He didn't just dream, he worked every single day to become who he wanted to be. That mix of an ordinary childhood and extraordinary discipline became one of the secrets that set him apart early on. He was laying brick by brick, not just a physique, but a champion's mindset. That discipline eventually led Haney to take a big step forward when he joined the YMCA, a place that offered access to sports facilities and training programs. It was there that his journey took a decisive turn. Among all the young people training there, a coach named Danny Rogers quickly noticed something special about him. It wasn't just raw strength or good genetics. It was his rare physical balance, combined with a dedication that was impossible to ignore. Rogers didn't take long to call it out. He told young Haney, "You've got one of the most balanced physiques I've ever seen. If you stay committed, you could become one of the greatest bodybuilders in the world." Those words echoed in Haney's mind and shifted his perspective. Bodybuilding was no longer just a passion, it became a real career possibility. That meeting changed his life forever. For the next 4 years, Rogers was more than just a coach. He became a mentor. Under his guidance, Haney learned proper lifting techniques, developed professional posture, and built a solid foundation of knowledge. He understood that bodybuilding wasn't only about moving heavy weight. It was about training smart, respecting your body, and evolving step by step. By the time he was 14, the results were already jaw-dropping. Haney had a physique way ahead of the curve for his age, and naturally, people noticed. While most teenagers were just starting to figure out their first workouts, he looked like he was on a whole different level. His muscle development, symmetry, and athletic build stood out anywhere, making it obvious that a future champion was in the making. Even though he was invited to join several high school sports, football, basketball, track and field, Haney never lost sight of his real goal. He had fun on the field and on the court, but nothing compared to the idea of sculpting the perfect body. Lee Haney's talent started turning into real results while he was still a teenager. In 1975, at just 16, he decided to compete in the Mr. South Carolina, his very first bodybuilding contest. He showed up inexperienced, stepping on stage in nothing but regular underwear, without the slightest clue about proper posing or presentation. Looking back, the scene sounds almost funny, but it was a turning point. Even without ideal prep, Haney fell in love with the competitive atmosphere and knew right then and there that this was his path. That first spark of passion didn't fade, it got stronger. He went back to training with even more motivation. Every mistake from that first show became fuel to sharpen his performance. Haney realized early that bodybuilding wasn't just about flexing muscle. It was about technique, stage presence, and confidence. That awareness at such a young age would be key for the victories ahead. 2 years later, in 1977, he faced one of the toughest decisions of his life. Haney had also made a name for himself in football, earning a college scholarship. For most people, that was the safe bet, a degree and a solid shot at a sports career. But for Haney, his heart was louder than logic. He didn't want the safe road. He wanted his passion. So he made the bold move of leaving college behind to dedicate himself fully to bodybuilding. To many, that choice looked crazy. Who in their right mind would walk away from a secure academic path just to gamble everything on such an uncertain sport? But Haney believed in himself and was willing to take the risk. That courage to double down on his own dream set him apart from other athletes of the time. He wasn't just training his body. He was strengthening his determination and his vision for the future. In 1979, at 20 years old, that gamble paid off. Haney won the Team Mr. America title, one of the most prestigious contests for young athletes. That victory wasn't just another trophy. It was his way of announcing to the bodybuilding world that a new force had arrived. The crowd and judges alike were blown away by his mix of size, proportion, and symmetry, the trademarks that would define his career. After Team Mr. America, Haney could have just kept competing nonstop. Instead, he made a strategic move that showed maturity beyond his years. He stepped away from competition for 3 full years to fine-tune his physique. During that time, he went all in. Intense training, strict diet, and attention to every detail of his progress. It wasn't time wasted. It was an investment that would pay off big. And it did. In 1982, Haney came back to the stage with a completely transformed physique, and it was clear he'd reached another level. He won the Junior Nationals heavyweight class and took the overall title too, proving he wasn't just another competitor. He was destined for the top. But he wasn't done yet. Later that same year, Haney dominated again at the Senior Nationals, cementing his dominance in the amateur ranks. That momentum carried him to his biggest win yet, the Amateur World Championships. At just 23 years old, Lee Haney officially earned his professional bodybuilding status, making real the dream that started when he was 12 with those simple sand-filled plastic dumbbells. What really stands out is how he turned risk into reward. Walking away from college to bet everything on bodybuilding could have ended in disappointment. But Haney treated every sacrifice as part of the process, and 1982 proved he was right. His entry into the pro scene wasn't just about talent. It was about discipline and strategy. By 1983, he wasn't satisfied with just celebrating his success. Haney dove headfirst into the pro circuit, competing in 7 shows that year. He didn't win them all, but every contest gave him more experience, more lessons from the best, and more respect among the sports elite. By the end of that year, he was already widely recognized as having one of the most impressive physiques in the world. Then came 1984, the year that marked his true rise to the pantheon of legends. At just 25, Haney won his first Mr. Olympia, becoming the youngest champion in history at that point. And it wasn't a narrow win. It was a shockwave through the bodybuilding world. His blend of proportion, definition, and size was something people had rarely seen before. A new era had clearly begun, and that era was long and unstoppable. From 1984 to 1991, Haney collected 8 straight Mr. Olympia titles, breaking Arnold Schwarzenegger's record, which had long been the gold standard. Each year, Haney returned to the stage sharper, more refined, proving he wasn't just defending a title. He was constantly raising the bar for the entire sport. That stretch of time became known as the Lee Haney era, a period when bodybuilding was literally shaped in his image. Unlike champions before him, Haney managed to bring together two qualities that had always seemed at odds: massive muscle size and refined aesthetics. He proved it was possible to get huge without losing symmetry, keeping a tight waist and perfect proportions across every muscle group. His physique became the gold standard, the dream blueprint for anyone who wanted to compete. While some athletes chose to chase size at all costs, sacrificing balance, Haney stood out because of his harmony. That balance was his trademark, the edge that made him look untouchable. Judges saw in him the ideal mix of what bodybuilding was striving for: raw power and beauty, all in one body. The impact of his dominance was so great that many see the 80s and early 90s as a transitional era, one Haney paved himself. He didn't just stack trophies. He set a whole new standard for everyone else. His legacy isn't measured only by 8 straight Olympia wins, but by the new direction he gave the sport. Just look at the athletes who followed. Dorian Yates, who revolutionized bodybuilding with insane muscle density, and Ronnie Coleman, who pushed size to levels no one thought possible. Both openly admitted they were shaped by the standard Haney set. While many champs stood out for sheer brute strength or extreme size, Haney brought a strategic vision. His secret was smart training, balancing intensity with recovery. He knew muscles don't grow only under the weights, but also while resting. That approach, obvious to elite athletes today, was groundbreaking back then, and it gave him a longevity that few have matched. That philosophy wasn't just about performance, it also protected his health. Haney was never the kind of competitor who risked everything at any cost. On the contrary, he believed bodybuilding should build the body up, not tear it down. That mindset created a sharp contrast with later generations, where many athletes sacrificed long-term health chasing ever more extreme physiques. Another key point was the message he solidified: you could get bigger while still keeping aesthetics and symmetry. Before Haney, bodybuilding often felt split. You either prioritized mass or chased a more polished, balanced look. Haney smashed that wall, proving you could have both. He showed that being huge didn't mean losing beautiful lines, and that a true champion should bring all of those elements together in one package. That concept not only changed the way judges scored shows, but also reshaped the goals of rising athletes. His presence on stage was a constant reminder that perfection wasn't about excess, it was about harmony. That balance is what gave bodybuilding credibility as a sport, pushing it beyond the stereotype of just being about who could look the most monstrous. Yet despite his absolute dominance and his role in redefining bodybuilding standards, Lee Haney isn't remembered as vividly as other champs like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Ronnie Coleman, or Dorian Yates. It's strange that someone who ruled for 8 straight years on the sport's biggest stage doesn't get the same spotlight today. But why? What factors led to that relative lack of recognition compared to other icons? One of the clearest reasons is his reserved personality. Unlike Arnold, who leveraged charisma to become bigger than the sport itself, or Coleman, who lit up generations with his explosive style and legendary catchphrases, Haney always preferred to keep things low-key. He let his physique do the talking and stayed away from drama. While that showed professionalism, it limited his visibility outside the diehard fan circle. Another factor was the lack of a true iconic rival. History shows that great rivalries fuel fan passion. Coleman versus Cutler, Yates versus Sean Ray, Arnold versus Sergio Oliva. Those battles became immortal. Haney, on the other hand, was so dominant that his opponents often looked like they were only fighting for second place. Even though he faced talented competitors, none truly threatened his throne, which made his reign seem predictable and, for some fans, less thrilling. And then there was the choice that, while wise, also played into his fading spotlight: his early retirement. In 1991, at just 31, Haney decided to step away at the very top, right after his 8th straight Olympia win. Unlike other athletes who kept competing well into later years, Haney chose to protect his health and preserve his legacy. That decision, while admirable, cut down his continued exposure and meant his name circulated less in the decades that followed. The very era when he competed didn't help his recognition much either. In the 1980s, bodybuilding lost some of the mainstream visibility it had enjoyed during the Arnold era. Mr. Olympia stopped being widely televised and became something fans mostly followed through specialized magazines. That limited how far the champions could reach beyond the hardcore bodybuilding community. By the 90s and 2000s, the sport would grab more attention again, but by then, Haney was already off the stage. In 1991, after winning his 8th straight Mr. Olympia, Lee Haney made a shocking decision to retire young, still at the peak of his physique. He was only 31 years old, a point where most athletes are still in their prime. The choice was seen as bold, even controversial, but it showed the maturity of someone who knew when to stop, preserving not just his body, but also the legacy he had built with so much effort. Haney was always honest about why he stepped away early. For him, the mental stress of staying on top was way tougher than the physical demands of the sport. The pressure to show up every year with an even better body, to outdo himself, to handle the expectations of fans and judges, it became a heavy burden. He made it clear he didn't want to trade his emotional health for more titles, choosing instead to walk away with dignity. Another thing that set Haney apart from other big names was the way he looked at bodybuilding. To him, it was work, something he executed to perfection, but not an all-consuming passion that took over every corner of his life. That pragmatic view allowed him to keep balance between career and personal life. While other athletes lived and breathed bodybuilding every second, Haney made sure to stay grounded in family, faith, and his own well-being. Interestingly, his final Olympia appearance in 1991 only happened because of a little push. After winning his 7th title in 1990, Haney was ready to call it quits. But his wife, Shirley, convinced him to go for one more. She knew he had the chance to surpass Arnold Schwarzenegger's record and encouraged him to chase that 8th win. And that's exactly what he did. Haney came back, brought one of his best physiques ever, and cemented his place in history. What's most impressive is that Haney has never shown the slightest regret for retiring early. Quite the opposite. In recent interviews, he doubles down, saying it was the right move and that he has zero second thoughts. While many champions end up staying too long, risking both their health and their reputation, Haney stuck to his plan, bowing out at the top with his legacy untarnished. That decision only strengthened his image as a smart, conscious champion. After leaving the stage in 1991, Haney could have done what many ex-champs do: stay tied to the competitive circuit as a commentator, trainer, or fitness entrepreneur. Instead, he chose a different path, using his experience and credibility to work on health, wellness, and fitness education projects. His inspiring journey caught the attention of the U.S. government, and Haney even served on the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports under Bill Clinton's administration. That role reinforced Haney's image as someone who saw bodybuilding not just as entertainment, but as a tool to promote quality of life. He dedicated his energy to encouraging young people and adults to live healthier lifestyles, proving that building a strong body could go hand in hand with balance and longevity. It was an important step in breaking the stereotypes of bodybuilding as extreme or unsustainable. Free from the pressure of competition, Haney built a solid and respectable career offstage. Unlike some champions who chased the spotlight endlessly, he chose a quieter path, yet one with real impact. That choice helped keep his reputation positive, making him a role model not only for athletes, but also for families, young people, and fitness enthusiasts in general. Even so, Haney has never stopped being remembered as a legend. In interviews and rare public appearances, his presence always sparks admiration and respect. In 2023, for example, he gave an interview reflecting on his career, reaffirming that he never once regretted retiring at his peak. With the same calmness as always, he explained that his decision was conscious, rooted in protecting his health and prioritizing his family, values he always put first. That stance only reinforced the view of Haney as a champion who balanced ambition with wisdom. Instead of being remembered only as the 8-time Olympia guy, he's also celebrated as a man of principles, someone who transitioned from sport to everyday life without losing respect or relevance. His story proves that true greatness isn't just about what happens on stage, but how you live once the spotlight fades. Lee Haney is often remembered as the first great colossus of modern bodybuilding. Before him, champions had to choose, either be bigger or be more aesthetic. Haney tore down that wall, showing it was possible to combine massive muscle with harmonious proportions, setting a standard that still stands as a reference today. His mix of size, symmetry, and aesthetics paved the way for a whole new generation of competitors. You can clearly see Haney's influence in the athletes who came after him. Dorian Yates brought a level of muscle density the sport had never seen before, while Ronnie Coleman pushed size to extremes nobody thought possible. Still, both of them were walking the path Haney had paved. He was the bridge between Arnold's classic era and the rise of the mass monsters, turning bodybuilding into something bigger than it had ever been. Beyond the incredible physique, Haney is also remembered as an icon of professionalism, discipline, and strategic vision. He knew when to push, when to hold back, and, most importantly, when to stop. That wisdom made him stand out not only as a champion, but also as an example of balance in a sport so often marked by excess. Even today, his story sparks debates among fans and experts. If he had kept competing in 1992, would he have beaten Dorian Yates? Or maybe gone even further, setting records that might still be untouched today? We'll never know for sure, but those what-ifs keep the fascination alive and prove just how powerful his legacy really is. Haney also left a clear lesson. It's not enough to be great on stage. You need to be great off stage too. His balanced lifestyle, dedication to family, and work in health and wellness projects show that he turned sports glory into a lasting example. Those 8 Olympia titles were just part of his story. The real impact was the inspiration he gave to anyone chasing their best self. And that's exactly what makes him timeless. Haney wasn't just a champion. He was an architect of modern bodybuilding. His mark is still there in every athlete striving to combine size with aesthetics, in every fan motivated by his discipline, and in every discussion that places him among the greatest of all time. His legacy is so solid that even time itself can't erase it. Lee Haney will always be remembered as an immortal champion, not just for his 8 Mr. Olympia titles, but for the way he chose to say goodbye to the stage, at the top, with dignity and self-awareness. He showed the world that true greatness isn't only about how many times you win, it's also about how you decide to leave. His story is a living example of discipline, balance, and respect for one's own legacy. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Haney would have beaten Dorian Yates in 1992 if he had kept going? Or did he make the right call, walking away at his peak and protecting his health and legacy? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I love hearing your take and really want to know what you think about this bodybuilding legend. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories about the legends of bodybuilding. You can also become a channel member and support our work even more. It's a simple step that makes a huge difference, helping us keep bringing you high-quality content. And of course, share this video with your friends who love bodybuilding, or with anyone who needs to hear the inspiring story of Lee Haney. After all, a legacy is only stronger when it spreads. On the end screen, you'll find another amazing video I've put together with the same dedication. Click there and keep joining me on this journey through the lives of the sport's greatest champions. I'm sure you'll love it.